So good morning, everyone, for like the third time. Nancy Olmsted here, and I'm gonna turn on my camera and we'll get going here. So Andy Schultz has just shared in the chat the link to that website. So again, if you hadn't already looked at the program manual or the example plans or some of the resources that went with the presentations yesterday, that's where you can find those materials. So we'll open the floor for Q&A in a minute or two, but there were a couple of questions that came up at my field site that I thought would be useful to talk through this morning for everybody. The first question was a simple one. What is due on May 31st with regards to invasive plant control practice plans? And that is the application from the landowner. So if if you have been contacted by a landowner or you have reached out to clients to see if they would be interested in participating in the program this year, the application from the landowner with with the professional identified, that is what's due May 31st. No aspects of the plan are due on May 31st, just the application. Andy, go ahead.
I just want to emphasize that is the application for an invasive plant control practice plan. This is not connected directly to the treatment phase of the program, which comes later this year or next. So this is phase 2 is getting these plans in place. And if anybody here, has a client that wants a plan for one of their parcels, and just quickly the eligibility, minimum 10 wooded acres, maximum 1,000 acre ownership in Maine, wooded acre ownership. It's open to municipalities, land trusts, nonprofits, private family woodland owners, and maybe one or two other categories, but that's the bulk of it right there. And again, it's in the manual.
Thanks, Andy. You answered several of the additional questions, and I would just note specifically in the program manual, the landowner requirements / criteria to participate section begins on page 8. So page 8.
And again, we'll walk through it kind of in more detail on day 3.
Yep. So in the meantime, please refer to the program manual if you have questions or if you have specific scenarios. Andy is your go-to for questions about eligibility at this time.
Thanks.
I should say Andy or Jan, but
that's fine.
Great. So those were the questions that came up at my site that I thought were relevant more broadly. I'd also like to announce that everyone who requested membership to the iMapInvasives project, Maine Forest Service Invasive Plant Management Program, I have made you members of that project. So that should be current as of your latest browser cache clearing and new browser opening. So again, sometimes with iMapInvasives, you need to clear the browser cache and open a new browser. All right. So I want at this time to ask Andy and Jan if any questions came up while you were in the field yesterday that you would like to address at this time.
Nothing from my field site, really.
Okay.
And none from mine that I can think of at the moment. Or the questions that were asked, I think you've addressed already this morning. So,
okay, fantastic. I see in the chat, Maggie is asking, when can we expect to hear if the ICPP application is accepted? And will we receive any notice that the application has been received before the May 31st deadline? Regarding the second question, I defer to Andy and Jan. In other words, should people expect to receive a reply email from wherever they're sending the application form? I think let's answer that question first.
Well, I would say to take the time to do that will delay the time to actually show whether somebody's approved. So I would say no, there will not be notice of acceptance or notice of that we received the application. I already have close to 24. As soon as COB on May 31st comes along, we're going to batch them up. We're going to look at them, determine the estimated amount of cost share and see whether or not we can fund everything this year, which is what we hope to do. But at that point, there will be communication to folks one way or the other, hopefully mostly approvals.
Yeah, so
So
more
just,
specific. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
just going to say it will probably take a week after that to be able to issue those. So I would look for the answer about the second week in June.
Great. We have a question regarding, does the entire parcel need to be included in the plan? Or, sorry, I have to scroll here. Or can a plan be for a portion of a property?
Well, we do want to know the number of acres of the entire parcel, but there's also a line on the application for the estimated number of acres to be surveyed, as in surveyed for invasive plants. And that's really the key acreage when it comes to reimbursement and what's covered in the plan. So short answer is no. I think based on what we learned yesterday, if you determine that there's only a portion that really needs to be surveyed, portion of a parcel that really needs to be surveyed for invasive plants. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, so Andy, on the manual on page 8, it does say in terms of acreage limitations, so section 2B, applicants must include all owned woodland in a contiguous parcel in the plan. So I think our intent was that there might be ineligible areas such as maintained fields or the homestead area, which aren't wooded and wouldn't be included in the plan. But correct me if I'm wrong here, we did have a discussion about if it's a contiguous ownership, that it would make sense to apply for all the wooded acres at one time.
Well, it's so the surveyed acres can be non-wooded acres. They can be adjacent field or yard or what have you. That's part of the survey, even though it's technically not part of the woods. Certainly, if in the application, if you, a lot depends on what you already know about the lot. If you have a suspicion that you need to at least look on the entire parcel to see if there's any plants, then by all means include the entire parcel acres. It's an estimate. It just gives us an idea of the likely reimbursement, but the reimbursements will be calculated on the actual surveyed acres at the end of the day, or at the end of the process. Yes?
So Mort, I'm going to ask if you want to clarify your question or whether or not we've answered the question.
Sorry, I think you actually addressed it accurately based on my understanding, Nancy, which is that similar to the RAP plans, the intent is for a plan to recover an entire parcel. So the nature of the question yesterday at the field site was, can a landowner apply to just have a portion of their plan, a portion of their property, to write a plan for just a portion of their property? And I think, as you stated, the intent was that similar to the RAP plans, you really do want to at least include and determine whether surveying's appropriate for the entire parcel. You don't want to just leave a portion of a parcel or of a property out. So your understanding was kind of where I had landed. It's just like the RAP plans.
Okay,
Great.
so Are you good with that, everybody? What you're witnessing here, folks, is the building while flying aspect of this program. And Nancy and Andy have covered that well. I'm going to go back to a question that that Ron Lemin asked about a plan that he is doing currently for a landowner, and he's asking if he hasn't been paid yet, and if you know, he's currently working on that plan. Can that landowner apply to participate in the planning portion of this program? And then subsequently, if they've already contracted for treatment on that parcel, will they be eligible for treatment when that portion of the program becomes available?
Do you want me to explain that, Nancy?
I'm sorry. I was trying to reply to someone else's chat. Jan, do you need me to talk something through?
I think I responded to the first part. I think the plan, Ron, seems to me that it would be eligible if you've not been paid. They certainly can apply for that. And as far as the treatment, if you want to explain that, and Nancy or Andy, maybe.
Well, I already treated this year, and they've already paid me for this year, but I have not done a written plan, and it's going to be a multi-year scenario. So I don't know if they can jump on or not, since I've already started a plan. That's what I want to know. If I've already started a plan, but it's not in this program, can I try and get that landowner to enter that land? Is that possible?
I'm going to defer to Jan and Andy on that one.
Well, I'm going to say yes, in that the written plan itself has not occurred yet, if I'm understanding correctly. So that would be the next step for these folks to pay for, you know, to work with you and get the invasive plant control practice plan done, these are kind of more snapshot plans. They're not really like management plans going forward for a period of time. It's what's the situation now? What's the recommendation to work with what things are now? So I would think in your case, Ron, that the plan would somehow take into account the previous treatments and, you know, what needs to happen after that. And with that plan in hand, that landowner can apply for, you know, the recommended treatment through phase 3, and you know, which is yet to be determined how we're going to rank those, but with that plan in hand, they'd be eligible to apply. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. I mean, the worst case scenario is it doesn't get accepted. So
Right.
So I'm going to enter them. If it doesn't get accepted, then we'll continue as we are. If it gets accepted, then that's great. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Great.
Yeah. And the good news is they've started already.
Correct.
Yeah, we certainly hope that the demand, you know, is roughly equal to what we have available. There's a question here from Jake Meyer. Is the date of 5/31 for just this year, and will it be available again next year? Yes. The answer to your question, Jake, is it will be available again next year, and when those dates are determined, we will let you know. But there will be another round of opportunity for planning for landowners again next field season.
Jan, do you want to take the question from Eric Grove?
Yep. So Eric Grove asks if a town has a current project canopy grant, which towns are eligible to apply for forest management planning on town-owned properties. Should they or can they apply for this program to seek planning and control funding? And yes, certainly they are eligible to apply for this grant in collaboration, or, you know, in coordination with the forest management planning. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense if they're doing that. So I would suggest, yes, Eric, that they can reach out to me, and they should fill out one of those applications.
I'm going to address the question from Josh McKay regarding the pesticide license credits. So Josh, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you are looking to get continuing education credits from the Maine Board of Pesticides Control, what you need to do is fill out a Microsoft form that we will share a link for shortly. Andy, if you would be so kind as to share the link in the chat. That's how you can apply to get the 4 credits available from the Board of Pesticide Control. I'm not quite sure I understand about your second question about landowners applying for an application to complete this course. I don't understand. So if you want to unmute yourself, if I haven't answered your question, and ask your question verbally at this time, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry. It seemed like you guys are saying like you have to complete the course, try to get a parcel or an application for, management to complete the course. I wasn't sure if there was some requirement to complete this other than doing the training and on-site field and uploading onto the applications and stuff.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is you're wondering about the to complete this course, the Invasive Plant Academy, are there requirements beyond attendance the 3 days? And the answer is yes. So today we'll be going to the second field site where you will be taking data, and as you noted, uploading it to the website, the iMapInvasives website. And then each person who wants to become a fully qualified plan preparer will prepare a mini plan. And so I'm going to share my screen because I made a quick slide to indicate what's in the mini plan. So the mini plan that you would prepare based on today's field site includes 3 key components. Number 1 is the description of invasive plants found in paragraph form. So if you have the specifications and checklist for the invasive plant control plans in front of you, that is the last thing on the first page where it says description of invasive plants found in paragraphs. Describe in words the invasive plant situation on the property and highlight key findings, etc. So that's number 1, the first part of the mini plan. The second part of the mini plan is maps, and I've made an executive decision that it definitely does not have to include the property boundary for the purpose of the mini plan, just the other required maps. And number 3 is the prioritized management recommendations. And so, the prioritized management recommendations are sort of the heart of the invasive plant control practice plan. And so you can see more detail about those in the example plans and also on the specifications and checklist, page 2, and also in the program manual. So in order to have those 3 pieces, the data need to be in iMapInvasives. And that mini plan is going to be due on 5/28, and we'll tell you more about how to hand it in next week. But if you've looked ahead in the agenda, you'll see that there's actually time set aside on day 3 to complete several pieces of this. So, we really hope that between the end of the day today and the beginning of day 3, we budgeted 3 hours of homework. So, we hope and expect that you'll be able to put together a mini plan based on the fieldwork today and time we've set aside in day 3 and just about 3 hours of homework. So that's the other requirement for successful completion of the Invasive Plant Academy. So
Thank you
Josh,
very much.
so
I just wanted, there's a lot of reading, a lot of links. And so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something, and I wanted to make sure I was doing my due diligence and not missing something. So thank you. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something there.
Yep, you're 100% right, Josh. There's a lot of material, and so thank you for asking.
Okay, we've got 5 more minutes for the questions. There's a bunch of questions now about contiguous properties. If a landowner has multiple properties, but coming in at less than 1,000 acres total, should they apply for, or can they apply for just one planning cost share program, or should they apply for multiple?
Jan, if you scroll down, you'll see that the questioner found the answer.
Okay, I mean, I mean, if you want to articulate for the group, and then Paul has some follow-up questions too about contiguous land.
Okay, I can, well, just to finish up with the other, the answer is it should be for a contiguous parcel, and another separate, a non-contiguous parcel will get its own plan. If there's a case, I will say to Ms. Bruneau, if there's a case where it really makes sense to combine two nearby parcels, we can talk about it. But in general, I think the intent is that each parcel gets its own plan. But if you have a specific situation, let's talk about it offline. Paul, it's maximum total ownership of wooded acres. That's the basic limitation for the, this program, similar to forest stewardship or what we call WoodsWise. So the rest of it, I'm not exactly sure if I understand. It's total land, not 1,000 acres of one contiguous parcel. 1,000 acre, that is the upper limitation, is 1,000 acres of woodland owned in Maine by that landowner.
Yeah, it sounds like Paul and Sherry both are dealing with maybe a couple of towns and land trusts that may have just over 1,000 acres.
Can I ask clarification? When you say 1,000 wooded acres, would that exclude, for example, maintained hay fields? I mean, if the land trust has just over 1,000 and it turns out that, 200 of those are maintained for, field bird habitat, perhaps the true number for purposes of our granting authority might actually be lower.
Exactly. It's not total ownership, it's total wooded acres owned. So you might want to look a little more closely at the cover types for those various parcels. If it's right on the edge, again, we can talk about it, but the money that we are using for this does come from the USDA Forest Service, and it's subject to certain limitations.
I would suggest for any of you who are working with towns or land trusts that are butting up against that 1,000 acre limitation, maybe reach out to us for specific responses.
We already did have to tell a landowner that would otherwise be very eligible that they were not, because they were over 5,000 acres.
Right. Yeah. And in that case, it's very clear cut. I mean, I'm thinking of some of Paul's clients, towns that may have, right around 1,000 acres. And, there are many towns that have around that amount of land in woodland conservation. City of Portland has more than 1,000 acres in wooded acres. So, it's not uncommon that when you batch it all up that they would have more than 1,000 acres. So I'd reach out.
Yeah. And just seeing, again, Sherry Bruneau, open wetlands that are not forested wetlands would not be considered wooded acres. A forested wetland would be, but not a marsh, shrub, scrub wetland. I do want to say, though, that for folks who are working with those people, that's a limitation on getting financial assistance for a Maine Forest Service approved plan. I'm hoping people will find value to this program outside of just the cost share piece. The approach, the planning template, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's open source. Anybody can use it. It's just that we will not be able to provide the financial assistance for plans for woodland owners that are outside of our limitations.
So folks, I just want to note that it's 8:30. I want to say quickly, Dean, regarding your question of how we've advertised this program, we have put out a press release, which was picked up by several news outlets, and we also have advertised the program in the newsletter of the Maine Woodland Owners Association. And we've also done a bunch of word of mouth and advertising via the Gov delivery, the listservs, the email listservs that are maintained by our department. Eric Grove, do you have a brief question that we can answer in 2 minutes? If so, I invite you to unmute yourself. Excuse me, Jake Mayer.
It is a question kind of for Andy, because I talked with Andy about the fields. I have one customer already and he got some fields. And Andy, didn't you tell me that the field can be included?
Yes, the field can be included, or field edges, if that's where there's invasive plants in the plan itself. But we've been talking about the limitation on eligibility, and that's based on wooded acres.
Okay.
So let me just clarify. I think we were clear, Andy, that we were talking about field edges, not the interior portions of maintained fields. So let's just be, I'm pretty sure that in the program manual, it talks about field edges, not interior portions.
I think we use the term adjacent land. Could be open to some interpretation, but yes, the idea is, you know, if that's where the problem in the woods is coming from, then that can be included in the survey.
Yep. So the language in the program manual says old fields, shrub thickets, and/or hedgerows adjacent to wooded land, rural lands that impact wooded land. So if people have further detailed questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask.